Introduction. Time travel. A mystery that has haunted science, history, and imagination for centuries. But what if it's not just fiction? What if real people have already slipped through time and left proof behind? Tonight, we'll explore true stories and shocking evidence of those who might have crossed the boundaries of past, present, and future. From lost photographs to impossible encounters, these cases will make you question everything you know about reality. So, get comfortable, because once we begin, you might start to wonder, what if you have already met a time traveler? John Titor. In the early 2000s, the quiet corners of the internet became a stage for one of the most intriguing tales of alleged time travel. It began on obscure discussion boards, long before social media ruled the world. A user under the name John Titor appeared and claimed to be a traveler from the year 2036. His tone was calm, almost detached, as if speaking from a distant world he knew too well. Titor explained that he was a soldier working for a military unit in the future. His mission, he said, was to travel back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer, an old and forgotten piece of technology by then. According to him, this machine held a unique ability. It could debug legacy computer systems that were still used by his government in 2036. It was, he claimed, crucial to prevent a major computational failure. But while passing through the year 2000, he decided to make a stop. He began posting online, leaving messages for those who were curious about the world to come. What set John Titor apart from ordinary hoaxes was the level of technical and historical detail in his posts. He described the inner workings of his time machine, which he said was a C204 gravity distortion unit, built by General Electric. He listed the components with eerie precision: twin magnetic housing units, electron injection manifolds, cooling vents, and micro-singularities. The machine, he said, was mounted inside a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, a strange mixture of past and future, of metal and theoretical physics. Titor's explanations about the nature of time were consistent and elaborate. He wrote about multiple world lines, separate timelines coexisting like threads of possibility. When a traveler moved between them, he said, the future they returned to might not be exactly the one they left. This concept mirrored scientific discussions about quantum mechanics and parallel universes that were only beginning to gain traction in the public sphere. People were fascinated. His predictions about the near future began circulating across forums. He spoke of coming civil unrest in the United States, of a second civil war that would break out in 2004 and end by 2015, leaving the country divided into 5 regions. He mentioned a global nuclear conflict in 2015, claiming that billions would die but humanity would survive and rebuild. He even described details of future technologies: self-driving cars, advanced artificial intelligence, and a decentralized internet, long before such ideas were commonplace. Skeptics dismissed his story as an elaborate online roleplay, yet some of his remarks later seemed eerily aligned with reality. Titor predicted rising political division, the spread of global surveillance, and a growing dependence on networked machines. He hinted that the Olympics would eventually be cancelled, which, decades later, nearly happened due to a worldwide pandemic. For believers, each new world event seemed to echo fragments of his prophecy. But John Titor never asked for fame or money. His presence was brief and strangely purposeful. He spoke politely, answered questions logically, and often warned readers to value family and knowledge, as if addressing people he knew would one day be gone. His last message appeared in March 2001, where he said he was returning to his own time. Then he vanished completely. In the years that followed, countless investigators tried to uncover his identity. Some traced his IP addresses, others analyzed the technical diagrams he had posted, comparing them with classified military patents. A few believed it was a marketing stunt or a piece of collaborative fiction. Yet, no one was ever able to prove who John Titor really was, or if he existed at all. What remains is the digital trail he left behind. Fragments of text, archived pages, and images of a supposed time machine's manual. Each message carries a strange sense of nostalgia, as though a voice from another century reached out to warn us, then faded back into the static of the internet. 2 decades later, the legend of John Titor endures. He has become a modern myth, a reflection of both our fear and fascination with the future. Whether he was real, imagined, or symbolic, his story captures something deeply human, the desire to see beyond time, to reach back or forward and make sense of the chaos that connects every moment. The mystery is unsolved. The posts remain, and somewhere, buried in the quiet archives of the web, the name John Titor still flickers like a ghost signal from another timeline. A reminder that maybe, just maybe, the borders of time are not as rigid as we believe. The time-traveling hipster. Among all alleged proofs of time travel, one of the most quietly haunting began not with a prediction or a confession, but with a photograph, a frozen moment from the past that seemed to hold a contradiction no one could fully explain. The image was taken in 1941 at the reopening ceremony of the South Fork Bridge in the small town of Gold Bridge, British Columbia, Canada. It was an ordinary scene for that era, men in hats and coats, women in conservative dresses, gathered to celebrate a local event in the shadow of the Second World War. But in the center of the crowd stood one man who looked as if he did not belong there at all. He wore dark sunglasses, the kind not yet common at the time. His hair was tousled, his hooded sweatshirt bore a modern-looking logo, and beneath it, he seemed to be wearing a graphic t-shirt, something unheard of in 1941. In his hands, he appeared to hold a compact camera, resembling the style of small portable models that would not exist for decades. At first glance, he could be mistaken for a misplaced tourist, until one notices the undeniable fact. Everyone else in the photo is dressed unmistakably for the 1930s or early 1940s. Their clothing, their posture, even the materials of their coats belong to that time. The stranger stands out like a misplaced fragment from another century. The photograph remained unnoticed for over half a century until it resurfaced in the early 2000s. When it appeared online, it spread with quiet fascination. People began calling the figure the time-traveling hipster. The name came naturally. His style resembled that of a young man from the early 2000s, not a person from the era of rationing and war. Experts were consulted. Historians, fashion analysts, and photo specialists examined every inch of the image. It wasn't manipulated. The photograph was an authentic gelatin silver print, verified as a genuine artifact from the early 40s. No signs of digital editing or compositing could be found. The anomaly, if it was one, existed in the negative itself. As curiosity grew, researchers began dissecting the details. Some claimed that the man's sweater might not have been as modern as it seemed, perhaps an old-style cardigan with a stitched emblem. Others argued that the sunglasses, though rare, could have existed, used by mountaineers or skiers in that period. The camera, too, might have been an early Kodak or Zeiss model. Each explanation offered a small relief, a rational foothold in the face of something that felt impossible. And yet, even as rational analysis accumulated, the unease remained. There was something about the man's demeanor, casual, relaxed, almost detached, that made him look like someone out of place not just in dress, but in time itself. He seemed aware of his surroundings, yet uninvolved, like an observer visiting a moment that was not truly his. For those who believe in time travel, the hipster became a symbol of how such journeys might appear to us. Subtle, unannounced, hiding in plain sight within old photographs, noticed only decades later when history has caught up with fashion and technology. His presence did not rewrite the past or alter the flow of events. It simply existed, a quiet ripple on the surface of time. The photograph now resides in the Virtual Museum of Canada, preserved as part of the historical archives of the Bridge River Valley. Curators acknowledge that the image is authentic, though they refrain from supporting any supernatural interpretation. To them, it is simply an intriguing example of how perspective, fashion, and imagination can converge to produce mystery. But for many who look at it, the mystery feels too precise to be coincidence. The combination of items, the modern lenses, the stitched sweater, the printed shirt, the metallic camera, seems like a snapshot of another era quietly inserted into the past. Those who have studied anomalies in photography know how persistent they can be. Shadows misalign, reflections appear where they shouldn't, people vanish between frames. Yet this case is different. Nothing is missing or distorted. It's the presence that defies logic, not the absence. The man is there, solid and confident, embedded in history like a misplaced visitor. Over time, the story of the time-traveling hipster has been retold countless times. It became part of television documentaries, Reddit discussions, and late-night theories shared in whispers. The idea that time travelers might be leaving small, almost playful traces of their existence, just enough for future generations to find. Even in scientific circles, the image occasionally surfaces as an example of temporal pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive time anomalies where none exist. Yet the photograph persists, refusing to dissolve entirely into rational explanation. It has become a paradox caught on film. Too strange to dismiss, too ordinary to confirm. Perhaps what makes it so captivating is its simplicity. It's not a complex story of portals or machines, not a detailed confession of a traveler from the future. It's a single frame, still, silent, and open to interpretation. A mystery frozen in silver and light, surviving the decades unchanged. When people look at the time-traveling hipster, they are not just seeing a photograph. They are staring at a possibility, that time might not be as linear as it feels, that the past and the future could occasionally touch in imperceptible ways, leaving behind small, inexplicable footprints. The man in the photograph has never been identified. No record of his name, his background, or his purpose has ever surfaced. He remains a ghost of time, one that neither historians nor scientists can fully erase. And as the world moves further into the digital age, the image continues to circulate quietly, provoking the same soft unease it did when it first appeared. Maybe that is the true power of the time-traveling hipster. Not proof of time travel, but a gentle reminder that history itself can be fragile, that a single moment, captured by accident, can challenge our deepest assumptions about what is possible. Andrew Carlssin. In 2003, a strange story began circulating through financial news outlets and internet forums. It told of a man named Andrew Carlssin, who had allegedly been arrested by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission after turning an investment of just $800 into $350 million in the span of 2 weeks. The numbers made no sense. Even in the volatile world of stock trading, such consistent accuracy was statistically impossible. Every one of his trades had been perfectly timed, each purchase made just before a company's stock rose dramatically, and each sale completed before prices fell. For analysts and regulators, it was not only suspicious, it was unreal. When confronted, Carlssin's response was even stranger. According to reports, he claimed that he had not committed insider trading at all. Instead, he insisted he was a time traveler from the year 2256. He said that he had come to the early 21st century to make a few strategic trades, using his knowledge of historical data in order to fund future scientific research. Authorities, of course, treated it as delusion, but the details of his confession made the story linger. Carlssin reportedly spoke calmly, with perfect recall of market movements, social events, and even geopolitical trends. He predicted short-term fluctuations in oil prices and upcoming mergers that had not yet been announced. Every statement he made seemed strangely plausible, as if he were reading from a script already written. The reports claimed that he was detained for questioning, where he offered to reveal information about the location of Osama bin Laden and the cure for AIDS, in exchange for leniency. The story spread rapidly through tabloids and early online communities, each version slightly changing, but always keeping the same eerie core. A man who knew the future because he had already lived it. The SEC never officially confirmed his existence. No arrest record or public document bearing his name was ever found. Yet, for many, that absence only deepened the mystery. If the event had truly been fabricated, why did so many early news outlets, including reputable financial sources, report it simultaneously, as though citing an internal briefing? As the legend grew, more details appeared. Some claimed that Carlssin had been released on bail and then simply vanished. Others said that a mysterious benefactor had paid his bond, after which he was never seen again. His personal documents, employment records, and even his supposed residence in Toronto all seemed to dissolve from public record shortly after the story broke. Skeptics later traced the origin of the report to Weekly World News, a tabloid known for its sensational stories. This revelation seemed to discredit the account. Yet by that time, the myth had already taken root in the digital landscape. Forums, radio shows, and early YouTube videos treated the case as one of the few potential proofs that time travel might already exist. Behind the exaggeration, however, the story of Andrew Carlssin reflects something deeper in the collective imagination. It embodies a fascination with knowledge beyond time, the idea that somewhere, someone could see history not as a progression, but as a completed pattern, a map already drawn. In that vision, the stock market becomes a symbol not of risk, but of destiny. Each price, each rise and fall, predetermined in the sequence of time. In retrospect, nothing about Carlssin's claim holds verifiable truth. There are no government records, no photographs, no fingerprints, and no trace of a man by that name connected to any financial investigation. Yet, the persistence of the tale, its refusal to disappear, has given it a kind of quiet power. It is repeated not as evidence, but as a story that feels strangely possible in an age obsessed with data, prediction, and the manipulation of time. Some historians now interpret the Carlssin myth as a parable of the early digital century, a reflection of how rapidly technology was advancing, and how ordinary people began to imagine the limits of time itself being rewritten. In a world where financial algorithms now predict markets within milliseconds, the idea of a time traveler profiting from knowledge of the future no longer seems entirely beyond belief. The legend of Andrew Carlssin remains one of the most enduring modern fables about time travel. It sits at the intersection of science fiction and financial reality, a story that began as a hoax, but evolved into something larger than truth. Somewhere in the archives of forgotten online articles, his name still appears beside numbers that defy logic. $800 turned into $350 million. Whether fact or fiction, it stands as a reminder of how easily the line between speculation and belief can blur, and how deeply the human mind hungers for the possibility that time, in the right hands, can be bent, even just long enough to change everything. Rudolph Fentz. In the heart of New York City during the summer of 1951, a man appeared suddenly on Times Square. Witnesses later said he looked confused, as though he had never seen a car or heard the noise of a modern city before. He was dressed in Victorian-style clothing, a long coat, tall boots, and a top hat. His facial hair was carefully groomed in the fashion of the late 19th century. In his hand, he held a small bronze watch attached to a chain. He stood there, frozen in disbelief, surrounded by flashing lights and traffic. Moments later, he stepped into the street and was struck by a passing car. The police arrived quickly. The man was taken to a nearby morgue, where officials began the usual process of identification. It was only then that they realized how strange the case truly was. In his pockets, investigators found a handful of items that didn't belong to the 1950s. There were copper coins, minted over 100 years earlier, yet untarnished by time. There was a business card bearing the name Rudolph Fentz, with an address in New York that no longer existed. There was also a letter postmarked in 1876, and a bill from a livery stable, a type of service long vanished from the city. Even his clothing was made from fabrics and materials that had not been produced for decades. No one could explain how a man dressed like that had appeared in the middle of one of the busiest intersections in modern Manhattan. The police began searching through public records. To their astonishment, they discovered a Rudolph Fentz listed as missing since 1876. According to old reports, he had left his home one evening for a short walk and never returned. His family had searched for him for months before he was declared dead. The parallels were undeniable. The description matched perfectly: age, height, features, even the small details of his mustache and posture. The handwriting on the letter matched archived family documents. It was as if the man had simply stepped out of one century and into another, his life interrupted by 75 years of missing time. The story spread quietly at first, appearing in police bulletins and local newspapers, before finding its way into magazines and later into radio programs. People were drawn to its eerie balance between tragedy and impossibility. A man, perfectly preserved in his own era, lost in time and space, emerging only to meet his fate among strangers. For years, the legend of Rudolph Fentz was cited as one of the strongest pieces of evidence for accidental time travel. The notion that under certain conditions, people might slip through unnoticed cracks in the fabric of time. It seemed to fit neatly within reports of other time slips that surfaced throughout the 20th century. But there was something unusually consistent about this one. The documentation, the name, the official records all lined up too precisely to dismiss. Eventually, skeptics began to search for the truth. In the 1970s, researchers traced the story back to a science fiction magazine from the 1950s, where a short story told nearly the same tale. A man named Rudolph Fentz who vanished in 1876 and reappeared in 1950. The author was Jack Finney, who would later become known for The Body Snatchers, a novel about alien replacement and temporal displacement. It seemed, at first glance, that the entire legend had originated from fiction and later been mistaken for fact. Yet even after this revelation, many refused to let go of the mystery. Some argued that Finney's story was itself inspired by an earlier police report, now lost to time. Others pointed out inconsistencies in the supposed debunking, noting that certain police archives did indeed contain unsolved cases matching the description. The line between story and record blurred until no one could say with confidence where imagination ended and reality began. Today, the tale of Rudolph Fentz is remembered not just as a curiosity of time travel folklore, but as an early example of how myth can merge seamlessly with documented history. Whether real or invented, the power of the story lies in its subtlety. It contains no grand machines, no scientific explanations. Only a man, alone, displaced, confused by a world that had moved on without him. What endures is the image of that moment in Times Square. The bright lights of the city reflecting off polished leather boots. The echo of a pocket watch ticking in a century where it no longer belonged. The name Rudolph Fentz remains a ghostly reminder of how fragile the boundary between past and present can be, and how a single step, even taken innocently on a quiet evening, might lead to a place far beyond one's own time. The Moberly Jourdain incident. In the quiet corridors of academia, few stories have lingered as persistently as that of two English women who, in the early 20th century, claimed to have slipped through the boundaries of time itself. It was 1901 when Charlotte and Moberly, the principal of St. Hugh's College in Oxford, and her assistant Eleanor Jourdain, set out on a visit to the Petit Trianon, a small chateau nestled within the grounds of Versailles, France. What began as a simple sightseeing trip would soon become one of the most compelling and debated accounts of alleged time travel in modern history. The women were on holiday in France, enjoying the serenity of its landscapes and the rich cultural heritage of Paris and its surroundings. On August 10th, under a bright summer sun, they took a train to Versailles and wandered through the gardens. As they walked, however, something changed, something subtle yet deeply unsettling. The air grew heavy, almost dense, as if the light itself had altered. The atmosphere, they later said, became oppressively still. The birds had stopped singing. A strange sense of melancholy settled around them. Unfamiliar figures soon appeared, men dressed not in the modern fashion of 1901, but in what seemed like 18th century attire, long coats, tricorn hats, and powdered wigs. The two women were confused, unsure if they had stumbled upon some historical reenactment, though none had been scheduled that day. They passed a man with a pockmarked face who looked at them with an expression so intense that Moberly later described it as repulsive. The setting seemed to shift around them. The paths were unfamiliar, the trees arranged differently from the maps they had studied. Then, near the Petit Trianon, Moberly saw a woman sitting on a stool sketching. Her clothing was distinctly old-fashioned. A pale green dress, a white hat, and a long scarf. Moberly felt a sudden chill. She was certain the woman wasn't a tourist. There was something ghostly about her presence, as though she didn't quite belong to their world. Soon after, a young man appeared and guided them toward the main building, and just like that, the spell broke. The air lifted, the light changed, and everything seemed ordinary again. It wasn't until later, after returning to England, that the two women compared their recollections in detail. Both felt that something extraordinary had happened, something they couldn't explain by reason or coincidence. They came to believe that they had somehow traveled back in time, perhaps to the late 18th century, during the days of Marie Antoinette. Moberly even speculated that the woman she saw sketching was the Queen herself, caught in a moment of private reflection before her tragic downfall. Their account was eventually published in a book titled An Adventure in 1911, under pseudonyms to protect their reputations. The book caused an uproar. Readers were divided. Some dismissed it as an overactive imagination. Others saw it as possible evidence of a time slip, a momentary crossing of dimensions that allowed a glimpse into the past. Skeptics offered alternative explanations. They argued that the women might have encountered members of a historical society or stumbled upon a rehearsal for a pageant. Psychological theories also emerged. Perhaps the two had experienced a shared hallucination, brought on by heat, fatigue, or suggestion. Yet, despite attempts to debunk their claims, no definitive evidence ever surfaced that could explain what they had seen, or why they described the same vivid details independently. Over the years, the Moberly Jourdain incident has continued to attract attention from researchers, paranormal enthusiasts, and those intrigued by the mysteries of time. Some suggest that Versailles, with its deep layers of history and emotion, could be a thin place, a location where past and present occasionally overlap. Others argue that the women may have tapped into what physicists later called time anomalies, regions where temporal perception becomes unstable. Whatever the truth may be, the story remains haunting. Two educated, rational women, with no history of superstition or fantasy, stood in a garden that seemed to breathe with the ghosts of another century. They saw faces, clothes, and landscapes that didn't belong to their time. And for a few surreal moments, they felt the weight of history pressing against the present, as though time itself had loosened its grip, allowing them to walk across centuries without meaning to. Even now, the Moberly Jourdain incident is cited not only as a possible case of time travel, but as a reminder of how fragile our understanding of reality truly is. In the calm gardens of Versailles, beneath the whisper of ancient trees, two women may have stepped beyond the linear flow of time, and into a moment that refused to fade, lingering in the space between history and mystery, where the past still waits, just out of reach. The Philadelphia Experiment. Among the many stories that blur the line between science and myth, few have provoked as much fascination as the Philadelphia Experiment. Said to have taken place in 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, this story tells of a secret U.S. Navy project that allegedly rendered a warship invisible, and, in doing so, may have torn a hole in time itself. It is a tale of scientific ambition pushed beyond the limits of reason, of men lost between dimensions, and of a technology that was never meant to exist. According to the legend, the experiment centered around the USS Eldridge, D-173, a newly commissioned destroyer escort. The Navy, it was said, sought to develop a method of electromagnetic camouflage that could hide ships from enemy radar and even from sight. The technology allegedly drew from ideas developed by Albert Einstein, specifically his unified field theory, a concept that sought to merge electromagnetism and gravity into a single framework. If manipulated correctly, it could, in theory, bend light and space around an object, making it invisible. Witnesses later claimed that on a summer day in October 1943, the Eldridge was fitted with massive generators and coils, producing an intense electromagnetic field around the ship. As the machinery activated, a greenish fog enveloped the vessel. Moments later, the Eldridge vanished, not just from sight, but from physical reality itself. Observers at the docks reportedly stared in disbelief as the warship faded, leaving behind only the turbulent water where it had been anchored. The story continues that the ship did not simply turn invisible. It was said to have teleported more than 300 kilometers away, appearing briefly in Norfolk, Virginia, before reappearing in Philadelphia minutes later. But the consequences of this experiment, as the legend tells it, were horrific. Some crew members allegedly materialized half-embedded in the metal decks, their bodies fused with the structure of the ship. Others were said to have vanished completely, never to return. Those who survived were reported to suffer from disorientation, memory loss, and even episodes where they would phase in and out of visibility. The U.S. Navy, of course, has always denied that any such experiment ever occurred. Official records show no indication of a Project Rainbow, the alleged code name for the operation. The Eldridge was indeed a real ship, but its logs place it in the Bahamas during the time of the supposed experiment. Yet, despite the denials, the story refused to die. It gained traction in the 1950s after a man named Carl Allen, who called himself Carlos Allende, began sending letters to a researcher named Morris Jessup. Allende claimed he had witnessed the experiment firsthand from a nearby merchant ship. In his letters, he described the strange green haze, the vanishing ship, and the horrifying aftermath. Jessup, intrigued, began investigating, but his life took a dark turn soon after. He became increasingly obsessed with the case and died under mysterious circumstances, which only deepened the intrigue surrounding the Philadelphia experiment. Over time, theories multiplied. Some suggested that the experiment had opened a rift in spacetime, briefly transporting the Eldridge into another dimension. Others linked it to early research into teleportation or invisibility cloaking. A few even claimed that the project continued under different names, morphing into later secret operations such as the Montauk Project, which allegedly explored time travel and mind control. Skeptics, however, have pointed out numerous inconsistencies. They note that many elements of the story rely solely on Allende's unverified testimony. The supposed teleportation could have been a misunderstanding of naval experiments with degaussing, a method used to make ships less vulnerable to magnetic mines by altering their magnetic signature. There is no credible evidence of crew deaths or strange physical phenomena. Yet, the legend endures precisely because it occupies that mysterious space between the impossible and the plausible. The idea that the U.S. military might have accidentally bent time in the pursuit of scientific progress resonates with a deeper human fear that our understanding of physics, though advanced, still hides dangerous unknowns. The electromagnetic forces that govern our universe are invisible but immensely powerful, and it is easy to imagine that tampering with them carelessly could produce unimaginable effects. For decades, the Philadelphia experiment has remained a symbol of forbidden science, a whispered story about what happens when curiosity outpaces caution. Whether a misunderstood experiment, an elaborate hoax, or a brief glimpse into the mechanics of reality itself, it continues to haunt the collective imagination. Some say the Eldridge still sails, ghost-like, through the currents of time, flickering between worlds, forever caught in the field of its own creation. Others believe the experiment never happened at all, that it exists only as a metaphor for human ambition gone too far. But in the stillness of a naval dock, where the fog drifts over the water, one might almost imagine the hum of generators, the crackle of unseen forces, and the moment when a ship, and everything aboard it, slipped silently out of time. The man from Taured. In the long history of travel and migration, border officials have seen almost everything: forged passports, nervous tourists, and every imaginable nationality. But in 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, a man reportedly arrived with documents that defied all explanation. His passport was legitimate, stamped with visas and official seals. Yet, the country it came from did not exist. It was labeled simply Taured. The story, which has since become one of the most intriguing mysteries of modern folklore, begins on a humid summer day. A business traveler, described as a well-dressed European man in his mid-40s, stepped off a plane from Europe and proceeded to customs. When asked to present his passport, he handed over a document that, at first glance, appeared perfectly normal. It was sturdy, official, and covered in authentic-looking stamps. But when the officer checked the country of origin, confusion spread across the desk. Taured? The official repeated. There was no such country on any map. The traveler seemed equally bewildered. He insisted that Taured was a real place, a small but proud nation located between France and Spain. He even pointed to the region on a map, where the tiny principality of Andorra lay. But when he saw the name Andorra, his expression changed. He claimed that he had never heard of it, that in his world, the country was called Taured and had existed for over 1,000 years. Airport officials, suspecting a forgery or a mental health issue, detained the man for questioning. They contacted the company he said he was visiting in Tokyo. The company had no record of his name. They called the hotel where he claimed to have a reservation. No booking had been made. Even the bank that supposedly issued his checkbook didn't exist. Yet, every item he carried, his passport, his driver's license, and his currency, appeared genuine and consistent with his story. Perplexed, the officials decided to hold the man overnight in a nearby hotel while they investigated further. 2 immigration officers stood outside his door to ensure he didn't leave. But when they checked the next morning, the room was empty. The man had vanished without opening the window, without passing the guards, and without leaving any trace behind. His belongings, his documents, even his passport from Taured had disappeared with him. No one ever saw him again. The incident was never confirmed by official records, and like many stories that teeter between truth and legend, it grew through retellings and speculation. Some say the man was a confused traveler caught in a bureaucratic nightmare, his story exaggerated over time. Others claim the entire episode was a fabrication, born from Cold War paranoia and the growing fascination with interdimensional phenomena. Yet, the details, the strange passport, the map pointing to a non-existent country, the sudden disappearance, continue to captivate imaginations around the world. Those who believe in the paranormal offer a different interpretation. They suggest the man from Taured was a traveler from a parallel universe, a version of Earth slightly different from our own. In his world, Taured existed, Andorra did not, and perhaps he had simply slipped through a crack in the fabric of reality. When he arrived in Tokyo, he found himself in a version of the world that wasn't his. And when he vanished, he might have returned home or fallen into another world entirely. Scientists and skeptics counter with simpler explanations. They point out that there are no official Japanese documents supporting the case, no verifiable names, no photographs. The story's first known mention appeared decades after it supposedly happened, likely inspired by similar accounts of mysterious travelers or identity mix-ups. But even so, the tale continues to thrive, retold endlessly in books, documentaries, and online forums. Its persistence reveals something deeper, a fascination with the boundaries of reality itself. The story of the man from Taured touches on one of humanity's oldest dreams, that there may be countless versions of our world, layered invisibly beside our own, separated by dimensions too thin to see. In one version, nations have different names, histories have taken alternate turns, and lives have unfolded along unfamiliar paths. Perhaps that is why the story endures. It speaks not to geography, but to possibility. Somewhere, in another timeline, there might truly be a country called Taured, its people unaware that in another world, their nation does not exist. And maybe, just maybe, a man once crossed that invisible line. Not through science or technology, but by accident, leaving behind a mystery that refuses to fade. To this day, travelers pass through Haneda Airport, unaware that, according to legend, a man once arrived there from a place that shouldn't exist. A place not on any map, but perhaps only a heartbeat away in the vast, unseen geography of time and dimension. The time traveler in Charlie Chaplin's film. In 2010, a strange discovery sent waves of curiosity through the internet. A discovery buried in one of Charlie Chaplin's classic films. A filmmaker and historian named George Clark was studying The Circus, 1928, one of Chaplin's silent masterpieces, when he noticed something that defied all explanation. In a short clip from the film's premiere footage, a woman walks across the frame, holding what appears to be, impossibly, a mobile phone. The footage, originally part of the DVD extras released decades later, shows a simple street scene outside the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles. People are gathering for the film's premiere, dressed in the style of the late 1920s. Horses pull carriages, men wear bowler hats, and the black and white film grain captures the timeless charm of the era. Then, for just a few seconds, a woman appears. She's older, dressed in a dark coat and hat, and she seems to be speaking into a small, rectangular object held to her ear. It's a fleeting moment, barely noticeable unless one looks closely. But when Clark slowed down the footage and analyzed it frame by frame, the image became uncanny. The woman's posture, the way her hand cups the object, the way her mouth moves as though she's talking to someone. It all looked eerily familiar. Viewers around the world were stunned. Could it be possible that a time traveler had been caught on film, decades before mobile phones existed? The clip quickly spread online, sparking debates across forums, documentaries, and news outlets. Some dismissed it as a trick of perspective, others as a hoax. Yet the strangeness of the gesture, the unmistakable modernity of it, refused to be explained away so easily. In the 1920s, portable communication devices didn't exist. The first true mobile phones wouldn't appear until nearly 50 years later. So what exactly was she holding? Skeptics offered several theories. Some suggested she might be using a hearing aid, possibly one of the early handheld models made by Siemens in the late 1920s. Those devices were bulky, though, and required a large battery pack, nothing like the small, sleek shape seen in the footage. Others proposed she might simply be shielding her face from the sun, or scratching her head in a way that created an illusion. But none of these explanations felt entirely satisfying. The scene looked natural, spontaneous, and oddly modern. The idea of time travelers caught in historical footage is not new, but the Chaplin's film Mystery remains one of the most famous examples because of its context. Chaplin's work often dealt with themes of time, progress, and human struggle within an industrialized world. To see, within his film, a mysterious figure that seems to belong to another century adds an almost poetic layer to the story, as if art and reality had briefly collided. Over the years, the time traveler in the circus has been re-examined countless times. High-definition restorations of the footage have been studied by experts in film preservation and historical technology. No one has definitively identified the woman, nor explained what object she was holding. It remains an enigma frozen in celluloid, an unintentional artifact of something that shouldn't have been there. Some enthusiasts have gone further, suggesting that if time travel were ever to exist, it might not require large machines or dramatic portals. It might happen quietly. A small slip in time, a momentary shift that allows a person to walk unnoticed among the past. Perhaps the woman wasn't meant to be caught on film at all. Maybe she was simply observing, blending into the background, unaware that her presence would one day become a global mystery. Others interpret the footage as a mirror of our collective fascination with technology and memory. We project our modern experiences onto the past, searching for signs of ourselves in the grainy echoes of history. The woman in the circus might be nothing more than a person caught mid-gesture. Yet our minds, hungry for mystery, turn her into proof of the impossible. Whether she was a traveler from another time, an actress rehearsing an unseen line, or simply someone holding a misunderstood device, her brief appearance captures something powerful, the allure of the unknown. In those few seconds, she bridges nearly a century of curiosity, inviting us to question what we see and what we believe about time itself. And so, within the flickering light of Chaplin's silent film, a piece of art meant to entertain, to make people laugh and dream, there lingers a moment that feels out of place, a shadow of the future appearing in the past. The woman passes by, speaking into an object that should not exist, leaving behind a question that no one has ever truly answered. To this day, her presence remains one of cinema's most haunting puzzles, a fleeting, silent whisper that reminds us how fragile the boundary between past and future might truly be. The time-traveling watch in a tomb. Sometimes, the mysteries of time are not found in stories or films, but buried deep beneath the earth, hidden in tombs that should have been sealed for centuries. One such case emerged from China in 2008, when archaeologists in Guangxi province began unearthing an ancient tomb believed to be over 400 years old, dating back to the Ming dynasty. What they found inside would become one of the most puzzling discoveries in modern archaeology. A small, modern-looking wristwatch, embedded in the centuries-old dirt of a sealed coffin. The discovery was accidental. During the delicate excavation of the tomb, one of the workers brushed away the soil from around a small piece of metal lodged between two stone slabs. At first, it looked like a simple ring, tarnished, coated in dust, and partially stuck in the surrounding rock. But when they cleaned it, the team realized it was something far stranger. It was a tiny, ornate object resembling a wristwatch. On its back was engraved a single word, Swiss. Even more bizarre was what the archaeologists found when they looked closer. The hands of the tiny watch were frozen at 10:06, and the front glass, though scratched, was still intact. Yet there was no logical reason for such an item to be there. The tomb had been sealed for over 4 centuries, long before the invention of wristwatches, which appeared only in the early 20th century. Moreover, the Swiss watch industry itself did not exist during the Ming era. News of the find quickly spread across China and beyond, igniting debates in both scientific and paranormal communities. Some called it the Swiss ring watch mystery, others simply the time traveler's watch. It became a sensation, a small physical piece of evidence that seemed to defy the linear nature of time. Skeptics, of course, sought rational explanations. They suggested that the tomb might not have been sealed as tightly as claimed, that perhaps it had been disturbed by looters or modern workers long before the archaeologists arrived. Maybe the object had simply slipped in somehow through cracks in the stone over the centuries. But others argued that this theory didn't align with the pristine condition of the tomb. The surrounding soil, undisturbed and compacted, showed no signs of intrusion. Those drawn to the supernatural saw the discovery as potential proof of time travel, or at least, of something that connected the present with the distant past in ways science could not yet explain. The watch, they said, could have been dropped by someone who had traveled back in time and accidentally left behind a trace of their journey. The engraving Swiss seemed particularly haunting, a modern signature embedded in an ancient world. There are also symbolic interpretations of the story. Some see it not as literal proof of time travel but as a metaphor for how human history folds upon itself. The presence of a modern object in an ancient context reflects the idea that time may not be as linear as we perceive it. It could loop, overlap, or fold in ways that occasionally allow objects or even people to slip through. Later investigations into the event produced conflicting reports. Some local officials dismissed the entire incident as a misunderstanding or a mistranslation of early news stories. No major archaeological journals ever officially published findings on the watch, and no physical evidence was ever presented to the public. Yet, despite the lack of proof, the story persisted, spreading through forums, newspapers, and documentaries. Why does it remain so captivating? Perhaps because it embodies one of humanity's most irresistible fantasies. That time can be broken, that the past and present can collide in small, unexplainable ways. A simple object like a watch becomes a key to the impossible, a relic that whispers of someone who may have walked where they should not have. Today, the supposed Swiss ring watch is often cited among the strangest archaeological mysteries. Whether a misunderstanding, a hoax, or something truly unexplainable, it continues to intrigue anyone drawn to the intersection of history and the unknown. Imagine, for a moment, the still air of an ancient tomb. The faint scent of dust and age, the quiet crackle of torches reflecting off stone walls that haven't seen light in centuries. Then, among relics of a vanished dynasty, something glints, something unmistakably modern, impossibly out of place. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Perhaps it never happened. But the story of the time-traveling watch endures because it challenges our deepest assumption, that time moves only forward. Somewhere, beneath the surface of our ordered reality, maybe there are places where timelines touch, and the future accidentally leaves its mark on the past. Håkan Nordkvist. In the mid-2000s, a Swedish man named Håkan Nordkvist claimed he had experienced something extraordinary. Not a dream, not a hallucination, but an actual journey through time. His story wasn't about secret government projects or ancient artifacts. It was something far more personal, almost mundane in its beginning. According to Nordkvist, it all started in his kitchen, on what seemed to be an ordinary afternoon in August 2006. He had returned home from work and discovered a small leak under his sink. Like anyone would, he gathered his tools and crouched down to fix it. But when he reached deeper into the cabinet to find the source of the problem, he realized the space extended much farther than it should have. Confused, he crawled in, expecting to find a hidden pipe or a misplaced tool. Instead, he found himself sliding through a narrow tunnel that shouldn't exist. When he finally emerged on the other side, Nordkvist claimed he was no longer in his own time. The surroundings were familiar yet subtly different. The air warmer, the light softer. Standing before him, in what appeared to be the same kitchen but decades ahead, was an older man. And that man, he said, was himself. The encounter was calm, almost surreal. The older version of Nordkvist smiled and seemed unsurprised, as if he had been expecting him. They talked for a while about the world, about life, and about how everything had changed. His future self, Nordkvist said, showed him futuristic appliances, technology that didn't exist in 2006. There was a strange sense of recognition, not fear. They shared stories, laughter, and, as Nordkvist later recalled, the feeling of meeting someone you know better than anyone else. To prove his claim, Nordkvist filmed a short video using his phone. A shaky, low-resolution clip showing two men sitting together, both with the same distinctive tattoo on their right arm. One tattoo was older and faded, the other fresh. In the video, both men rolled up their sleeves and showed the matching marks, smiling into the camera. The implication was clear. Håkan Nordkvist had met his future self. The footage quickly went viral in Sweden, then spread across the world. Viewers were divided. Some believed it could be the first real evidence of time travel, a rare case of someone meeting themselves in another timeline. Others dismissed it as a hoax, pointing to inconsistencies in lighting, editing, and the simplicity of the setup. The video was later linked to a viral marketing campaign by the Swedish insurance company AMF, which focused on preparing for the future. Still, the company never fully explained how much of Nordkvist's story was scripted, and how much might have been based on something he truly believed. Despite the commercial association, many remain captivated by the calm, almost intimate tone of Nordkvist's account. Unlike other tales of time travel filled with complex science or grand conspiracies, his was deeply human. It wasn't about changing history or saving the world. It was about seeing the passage of time made real, confronting oneself across decades, and realizing that the person you become might not be so different after all. Some interpret Nordkvist's story as a modern parable, a reflection of our obsession with aging, technology, and the unknown future. The image of him and his older self sitting together, smiling quietly in the glow of a kitchen light, carries an emotional weight beyond its factual mystery. It speaks to the universal desire to know what lies ahead, to see the outcome of our choices, and perhaps to find peace in knowing that our future selves are content. To this day, no definitive evidence has ever proven or disproven Nordkvist's experience. The original video remains online, still sparking debates and theories. Was it an elaborate hoax? A psychological episode? A viral art piece that blurred truth and fiction? Or was it, as he claimed, an unexplainable moment where time folded briefly upon itself? Whether real or staged, the story of Håkan Nordkvist captures a rare kind of wonder, the idea that time travel doesn't always require machines or laboratories. Sometimes, it might begin beneath a kitchen sink, in the hum of an ordinary day, leading somewhere beyond reason. And perhaps that's why his tale continues to endure. It feels strangely believable, not because of its logic, but because of its quiet emotion. A man, alone in his kitchen, opens a door not just into another time, but into himself. And for a brief moment, two versions of the same life meet. Both smiling, both existing, both real, somewhere within the endless flow of time. Project Pegasus. In the quiet shadows of American history, few government projects have stirred as much intrigue as Project Pegasus. A name whispered in conspiracy circles, coded in secrecy, and wrapped in claims of impossible technology. The project, as described by several supposed participants, was said to be a classified U.S. government program in the 1970s that explored teleportation and time travel, using early breakthroughs in quantum mechanics and spacetime physics. The story largely centers around a man named Andrew D. Biago, a lawyer and self-proclaimed former participant in the project. According to his testimony, he was one of many children involved in a secret DARPA initiative, an effort to test how young minds could adapt to experimental teleportation devices. He claimed that these experiments took place between 1968 and 1972, and that he had witnessed not only distant places but distant times. According to Biago, the purpose of Project Pegasus was multifaceted. On the surface, it was meant to explore quantum access, the ability to view or interact with past and future events. Yet underneath this scientific ambition lay a deeper purpose: to give the U.S. government a strategic advantage. If time could be accessed or altered, even slightly, then intelligence gathering could transcend the limits of conventional espionage. The technology he described was said to be based on Nikola Tesla's theories. After Tesla's death in 1943, the U.S. government reportedly seized his notes, which allegedly contained schematics for devices capable of bending time-space through electromagnetic fields. These notes, according to believers, were later used to develop early teleportation chambers, what Byago referred to as chronovisors. These devices, he said, projected holographic images from the past or future, like windows into other moments in time. Byago claimed he used these devices to witness key historical events. Among them, the Gettysburg Address, where he allegedly stood in the crowd and observed Abraham Lincoln deliver his famous speech. He described the experience in striking detail: the smell of dust and ink, the tension of the soldiers, the way Lincoln's voice echoed over the restless audience. The young Byago, he said, was disguised to blend in with the 19th century crowd, ensuring his presence wouldn't disrupt the flow of history. In another supposed experiment, he stated that he saw the future, the early 21st century, including the events of 9/11, decades before they occurred. Some reports even suggest he met himself as an adult during one of these time excursions, creating a paradox that haunted him for years. But perhaps the most haunting part of his story was the idea that Project Pegasus was not just theoretical research, it was operational. According to Byago, the U.S. government had already used time travel to monitor political and military outcomes, even grooming future leaders based on what was seen. He claimed that President Barack Obama was also part of the program as a young man, under the alias Barry C. Toro. Though this claim remains one of the most controversial and widely disputed aspects of his account. Skeptics, of course, point to the lack of physical evidence. No documents, no official acknowledgement, no credible scientific papers have ever supported the existence of teleportation or chronovision under DARPA. The Department of Defense has consistently denied any knowledge of such technology. Critics argue that the technical barriers to time travel remain far beyond modern physics, that bending spacetime would require energy on the scale of stars, not laboratory devices. And yet, the story persists. It lives in whispers across forums, documentaries, and late-night radio shows. For some, Byago's detailed recollections, names, locations, descriptions of the machinery, carry an eerie sense of authenticity. His conviction never wavered. He didn't seek fame or fortune, only what he described as disclosure, the right for humanity to know the truth about the real capabilities of its governments. In his later years, he even ran for political office, advocating for the public release of all time travel technologies and evidence of extraterrestrial contact. He spoke calmly, methodically, like a man recounting facts rather than fantasies. To him, Project Pegasus wasn't a conspiracy, it was simply hidden history. If his story is true, it would mean that humanity crossed the threshold of time travel long ago and has been quietly navigating the past and future ever since. If false, it remains one of the most elaborate and captivating tales of secret science ever told, a reminder of how close imagination often lies to belief. In the stillness of the unknown, Project Pegasus stands as a reflection of our deepest curiosities. The desire to conquer time itself, to know what lies beyond the limits of now, and to understand whether our future has already been written. Somewhere, in the corridors of a forgotten government lab. The mobile phone in 1938 film. Among the many strange anomalies that seem to challenge our understanding of time, one of the most puzzling appeared not in a classified laboratory or in the wilderness of the unknown, but in an old black and white film. The scene in question comes from a 1938 movie titled Young Girls Leaving Factory, a short film shot outside the DuPont factory in Massachusetts. At first glance, it appears to be an ordinary moment of the late 1930s. Women leaving work, laughing, and chatting as they walk past the camera. But then, for just a few seconds, one woman does something that seems impossible for her time. She appears to be talking on a mobile phone. She walks alone, smiling, and holds a small rectangular object to her ear. Her lips move. She seems to be engaged in conversation, exactly as someone might today. The other women around her take no notice. No one laughs or points. It looks perfectly normal, as if what she's doing is an everyday occurrence. But in 1938, the idea of a portable wireless phone was decades away. The first true mobile phones wouldn't appear until the 1970s, and even then they were enormous, heavy, and far from what we see in that fleeting moment on screen. When the clip resurfaced online decades later, it ignited waves of speculation. Some claimed the woman must be a time traveler, casually carrying a piece of future technology back into the past. Others thought it could be evidence of an early prototype communication device, secretly tested by industrial engineers before the technology was publicly known. The mystery deepened when people began analyzing the footage frame by frame, studying her hand position, the shape of the object, and even her expression. Several theories emerged. The most mundane explanation was that she was simply holding a hearing aid, as portable hearing devices did exist in the 1930s, though they were typically bulky and wired to a battery pack. Others argued she might have been shielding her face from the sun, or even scratching her head, but none of these interpretations quite matched the natural, conversational rhythm of her movements. She clearly smiles and speaks, pausing as if listening to someone's reply. Then, a few years after the video went viral, a surprising twist appeared. A man claiming to be the grandson of one of the factory workers contacted local media, stating that the woman in the footage was indeed his grandmother, and that she had been testing a wireless telephone prototype developed by DuPont's communications division. According to his account, DuPont and Bell Labs were experimenting with short-range radio transmitters during that era, intended for internal factory communication. These early experiments supposedly involved transmitting voices over limited distances between two compact handheld devices. This explanation sounded plausible enough, yet when researchers tried to verify the story, they found no records of such a project. DuPont's archives made no mention of portable communication devices from the 1930s. Bell Labs' research papers of the time focused primarily on wired telephone infrastructure. The prototype story faded into ambiguity, an anecdote that could neither be proved nor disproved. What makes the mystery so enduring is the tone of realism in the footage itself. There is no sign of editing, no obvious trick. The woman's mannerisms feel modern, almost uncanny. For a moment, the boundaries between eras blur. The hum of the past and the rhythm of the future seem to overlap in a single black and white frame. Scientists who study anomalies in old films point out that such interpretations often say more about the observer than the observed. We project modern expectations onto the past, seeing patterns that align with our world. Yet even they admit that this particular clip remains unusually convincing. The angles, the proportions, the behavior all mirror something that simply shouldn't exist in that year. Time travel enthusiasts have woven the scene into a larger narrative, one suggesting that travelers occasionally appear in the background of history, unnoticed, carrying artifacts from futures not yet lived. They claim that the 1938 woman, like the time-traveling hipster seen in another famous photo, represents a brief moment when timelines overlap and future realities ripple through the past. Whether one believes that or not, the image has become iconic. It reminds us of how fragile the perception of time can be, how easily a simple gesture can awaken the sense that something isn't quite as linear as we believe. If she was truly speaking into a device far ahead of her time, the implications are extraordinary, not just for technology but for our understanding of existence itself. If, on the other hand, it was simply a coincidence, a trick of the eye, a fragment of ordinary life misinterpreted by the future, then it reveals something equally profound: our deep human need to find wonder in the mundane, to believe that perhaps, for a moment, someone really did step through time and left behind a silent trace of the impossible. The mystery of Sergei Ponomarenko. In the spring of 2006, in the heart of Kiev, Ukraine, a man appeared on the streets who didn't seem to belong. His clothes, his manner, even the camera he held, everything about him seemed misplaced, as if he had stepped directly out of another era. His name, as police later recorded, was Sergei Ponomarenko. And according to him, he wasn't from 2006 at all. He was from 1958. The story began when local police were called after residents reported a confused man wandering the streets, looking around with visible disorientation. When questioned, he explained calmly that he had gone for a walk that morning and was simply lost. But when he was asked for identification, officers found themselves staring at an old Soviet passport, a document dated nearly 50 years earlier. His appearance matched the photo perfectly. A young man in his late 20s, hair neatly combed, wearing a mid-century suit. The ID seemed genuine yet impossible. At first, the police suspected he was an actor or a prankster. But when they examined the camera he was carrying, a vintage model from the 1950s, the mystery deepened. The film inside was carefully removed and developed. What appeared on the negative stunned everyone. The photos showed Kiev as it had looked decades ago. Old cars, narrow streets, and buildings that no longer existed in 2006. Yet among these vintage scenes was one striking image. A modern skyline, full of high-rise towers that hadn't been built in his supposed time. When investigators showed the photographs to Ponomarenko, he seemed equally shocked. He pointed at the skyline and asked how it could be possible. He claimed that while he had been photographing a strange cylindrical object in the sky, everything around him suddenly went dark, and the next thing he knew, he was standing in a completely different cityscape, familiar yet changed beyond recognition. The story only grew stranger. Psychologists were brought in to evaluate him, believing he might be delusional or suffering from memory loss. Yet, by all accounts, Sergei was calm, rational, and mentally sound. He answered every question clearly and consistently described his life in 1958, his fiancée, his apartment on the outskirts of Kiev, his work as an amateur photographer. There were no signs of stress, no confusion in his timeline. A few days later, doctors decided to keep him under observation in a psychiatric ward for further evaluation. But before any conclusions could be made, something inexplicable happened. According to official notes, Sergei disappeared from his locked room without a trace. Surveillance cameras showed no movement in the corridors. His bed was untouched. His clothes and belongings, including his vintage camera, remained neatly folded by the window. The case might have ended there. An unsolved mystery dismissed as rumor, but years later another twist emerged. A Ukrainian television documentary claimed to have uncovered photographs of Sergei Ponomarenko dated from the 1970s. In these pictures, a man resembling him stood beside his fiancée, who appeared unchanged, though decades should have passed. According to the report, the photos were found in a private family collection belonging to a woman named Valentina, who identified herself as Sergei's former partner. She told interviewers that he had disappeared for years, then reappeared suddenly, not having aged a single day. Skeptics dismissed the entire story as an urban legend or a carefully constructed hoax. They pointed out that no official police records or hospital files could be confirmed, and that much of the tale originated from a TV program dramatizing strange phenomena. Others, however, insisted that the evidence, the photographs, the camera, and eyewitness accounts, could not be so easily dismissed. For those who believe, the Ponomarenko case stands as one of the most compelling modern examples of time displacement. A man unintentionally caught between eras, momentarily crossing the invisible boundary of time itself. For others, it's a cautionary tale of how myth and media can fuse into something that feels entirely real. Regardless of which version one accepts, there's something deeply haunting about the image of a young photographer from the 1950s standing in the modern world, camera in hand, staring at skyscrapers that didn't exist when he last blinked. The sense of quiet confusion, of being torn out of one's own timeline, lingers in the imagination long after the story ends. Perhaps that's why the legend of Sergei Ponomarenko continues to fascinate so many. It's not just about time travel. It's about displacement, the fragility of reality, and the human fear of waking up in a world that no longer knows your name. No one knows where Sergei went after that final disappearance. Some say he returned to 1958, resuming his life as if nothing had happened. Others suggest he may have fallen into another moment entirely, lost somewhere between decades, a traveler forever caught in the quiet, endless current of time. Ending. And so, our quiet journey through the mysteries of time comes to an end. From the strange tale of John Titor to the haunting case of Sergei Ponomarenko, these stories remind us how fragile our understanding of reality truly is. Whether they are coincidences, hoaxes, or fragments of something we cannot yet explain, each of them whispers the same truth. Time is not as simple as it seems. If you enjoyed this meditative exploration, take a moment to leave a like. It helps more than you know. If you'd like to keep traveling with us through mysteries like these, Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe time travel could be real? Or are these just beautiful illusions born from our curiosity? I read every message you leave, and your perspective truly shapes these journeys. And if you know someone who loves strange, unexplained tales, share this video with them. Maybe they'll see something in these stories that we've all missed. Thank you for spending this time here, drifting through the unknown. Until next time, take care, rest your mind, and let your thoughts dissolve into the quiet rhythm of sleep. Good night, and sweet dreams.